What's going on, Canucks fans? Irfaan Gaffar here, filling in for David Quadrelli on Canucks Conversation. We'll get to Harman Dial, who is back in Vancouver from a couple games in Edmonton in a second. Just want to let you know, Canucks Conversation brought to you by the 2024 Toyota BZ4X. Now, the BZ4X is Toyota's brand new all-electric SUV that's designed to go the distance for you and for your family. The BZ4X is packed with Toyota's coolest tech, but it still has a trusty SUV feel you know and love. And even though it's electric, it's capable of conquering any terrain, whether it's rain, snow, mud, or your friends' questionable post-game recaps. Harm, there's been a lot of them this series. The BZ4X will get you through it. We're coming to you live from the iconic Wall Center in downtown Vancouver. If you're looking for your next meeting space, contact the Wall Center for all your event needs at sales@wallcenter.com. Fun couple games in Edmonton, Harm, games 3 and 4. Let's talk about game 4. The Canucks and the Edmonton Oilers are now tied at 2 games apiece after they make a third period comeback. You lose in the final 30 seconds of the game. And all the talk today has been about Elias Pettersson.
Yeah, so I'm sure we'll break down the goal. We'll break down the Pettersson conversation later. But I think big picture, the first takeaway is that I think the 2-goal comeback sort of obfuscates or ignores how heavily the Canucks were outplayed in that game.
Yeah.
Right? It makes it seem closer than it actually was, in my opinion, because up until Connor Garland scored to make it 2-1 in the third period, they looked lifeless for most of it. I thought it was really ugly up until that point. Then it's like a flip switched. And for the remainder of the third period, you're like, okay, wow, they're finally sustaining offensive zone time. They're looking dangerous. They're playing with pace, urgency. Like, where was this team in the first 40 plus minutes of the game, right? Because you look at the first period, for example, just 4 shots on goal, despite having 6 minutes on the power play in that period. Just 1 shot on goal at 5-on-5 in the first. And you even ask yourself, outside of Silovs, Garland, and Hughes, who should actually feel proud about the way that they played, right? And you go back to the first period, and since the drop of the puck, it felt like the Oilers were generating off the rush, getting tons of slot chances. They were hemming the Canucks. Canucks were having trouble breaking the puck out. They were turning it over too often. They were losing puck battles. It was a nightmare first period, like awful. And it started to feel like, okay, they're maybe finding their legs through the last several minutes of the second period. At least they're not getting hemmed territorially as badly. But even then, they weren't actually able to get to the inside and test Calvin Pickard. The high danger chances at 5-on-5 in that second period were 5-0 in Edmonton's favor. So that's the first big takeaway is, even though they came back and sort of tied it, I don't feel like they were actually in that game for long enough stretches of it.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. And we didn't even talk about the 6 minutes of power play time that they had in that first period and only generated 4 shots total in the period. So I think that's obviously another thing that we're going to have to get into, Harman. Why don't we just talk about that right now? I mean, you get the first power play. Okay, get out of the way. You get 4 minutes. Evander Kane high sticks Tyler Myers in the face. Yeah, I know people want a cross-checking penalty, but it was a high stick. That's what was called on the ice. You get the 4-minute power play. Okay. What did you not like from that? Because there's a lot of people that texted into Rinkwide and said, shoot, shoot, shoot. Well, clearly the Canucks only had 1 shot on it, and it was a Connor Garland kind of backing the puck out and shoving it in front of the net of Pickard.
I mean, they couldn't even get set up, right?
Yeah.
You can't tell them to shoot if they aren't even in a position where they have control of the puck in the offensive zone. It felt like the zone entries were just completely scattered. They were disorganized. They weren't on the same page. I think when you would watch the puck carrier, the other 4 attackers were too stationary, right? It's like they were waiting for the one guy to make a move, and then that one player would kick it out to the sideboards, for example, and it was too predictable. But what really bothered me, outside of just the execution from a skill perspective, was that I also thought they lacked will. I thought they got pushed off the puck way too easily. There were certain plays along the walls, for example, where felt like Canucks players were getting pushed off of it. Edmonton was winning battles and then getting those clearances. I thought they were a little bit soft on the puck, to be totally honest with you. And so it's not just that the skill-based passes, the skill-based decision-making wasn't there, but where was the gumption? Where was the holding on to pucks and making sure that you're hard to push off, because that's an underrated component of, let's say, Edmonton's power play. You want to talk about arguably the greatest power play of all time in the NHL, and Rick Tocchet is in many situations in the past referenced this as well. It's not just how they snap the puck around, right? It's not just the movement that they have. Of course, that's special, but they're also so aggressive at hounding pucks back after, like, when there's a shot from the flank or the point, at recovering it. And then a guy like Draisaitl is impossible to push off the puck. They don't turn it over. And I felt like that was an issue for the Canucks during that 4-minute double minor power play as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot not to like from the game. So let's go back to the third period, and the Canucks start to mount their comeback. You know, we talked about them not really being in the game at all, but when they were, what are the positive takeaways that you take from that, getting the game to 2-2?
Yeah, and this is where, like, big picture, right? We've just spent the first few minutes kind of slamming their performance. If you want to frame it as a positive, or like find a silver lining in it, this Canucks team is so pesky that even when they're playing really poorly, they nearly forced overtime.
Yeah.
Right? Like, what does that say about this team, that they weren't even close to playing well? The Oilers were having to dominate for large stretches territorially just to squeak out a 1-goal win. And I think big picture, when we take a step back and compare what a lot of pundits, especially outside of Vancouver, thought what the series was going to look like versus how it's actually played out, a game like Game 4 isn't what people expected, in the sense that people would have thought if Edmonton finds its gear offensively in a particular game like they did in Game 4, and that the Canucks are playing poorly themselves, that's the type of game where the Oilers just going to walk all over the Canucks. They're going to club them over. It was right there. It was 2-2. We nearly saw it go to overtime, and the Canucks in previous playoff games have sort of found a way to still win, even in games where they aren't playing well. So that's, I think, a positive to sort of take through the rest of the series, is this Canucks team isn't going to go away easily. And I certainly expect that their effort level is going to be a lot better, especially given how pointed the commentary from Tocchet was after the game. I also think from an Oilers perspective, like, I still feel like that team is at risk of shooting itself in the foot at any given moment.
Well,
like,
yeah, I agree
even in the first period, right? They were dominant in that first period. The Canucks were awful, right? They got that opening goal on the power play, but then the penalty itself by Evander Kane to take the double minor is reckless. It's dumb, and it had a chance of, if the Canucks had taken advantage of it at all of a sudden it's a 1-1 game. So even from Edmonton's perspective, like, that's a team that I wonder if they're going to be able to get out of their own way at certain points. And I remember talking to Drancer in the press box, and even going into the third, down 2-0, we were saying, like, I think the Oilers are going to need a third, because if and when the Canucks find a way to build some momentum, especially with Calvin Pickard in net, it could get dicey, and it certainly did. It once Garland scored, it was like, okay, this team's playing fast. This team's getting in on the forecheck. They're recovering pucks. Edmonton now all of a sudden is on their heels, instead of making plays up the ice and looking to transition with possession, looking to create off the rush. Now all of a sudden they are feeling the heat. They're feeling the pressure. They're throwing pucks away and handing them right back to the Canucks. It just really felt like the momentum flipped once Garland scored.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, Garland scored, things changed. The Canucks, realized that we're a team that is comfortable in these situations. How many 1-goal games has there been now? Is it 8 straight now for this hockey team? And, you look at it, and Rick Tocchet has mentioned it, this team's comfortable in 1-goal hockey games, but that third goal, right? That Bouchard goal. And there's a lot to break down there. I mean, Silovs might probably want it back. I guess it kind of hit him, and you get kind of a clear look at it. It wasn't too much traffic in front, but from your vantage point, what did you see on the final one there?
Just a lot of little breakdowns that compounded, right? One of the major themes that Tocchet has spoken about since he took over is, it's okay if there's 1 or 2 mistakes on a shift, but the next guy needs to be able to stop it right there, right? Like, you got to be able to bail each other out. And so you go through breaking down that sequence. It starts with the Oilers dumping the puck in. Hronek is under pressure from Kane on the defensive zone retrieval. Hronek doesn't win that battle, but then that's compounded by Zadorov is a little bit lackadaisical and a little bit late coming back to support Hronek on the breakout. So by the time the loose puck gets to Zadorov behind the net, he doesn't have enough space to wheel out. He's already under pressure. Whereas if he had been quicker to that spot, I think he would have had a little bit more time to make the play. So he's in a position where he's immediately going to get checked, right? So that's another mistake. Then Besser has an opportunity with the puck along the sideboards, and he has two options. He can either go to the middle to JT Miller to attempt a clean breakout, or he can go high chip. Either option is fine. If he's going high chip, he has to go over Bouchard, right? Can't be like right at him. He can't get it past Ekholm. That's a critical error there. Plus, to make matters worse, JT Miller had blown the zone. Whereas if he was on the right side of the puck in that situation, Miller could probably force it out because Ekholm like just barely held it in. And if there was pressure on him, I think a Canuck would have been able to force that play out. So how many? That's already what, 4 mistakes there. And then the puck ends up down low. Nobody is pressuring Draisaitl in that situation, right? He has all the time and space to
find someone.
Exactly. And so then that pass gets through. And then Miller's not in the shot lane, which he took a lot of responsibility and heat on himself for after the game. He isn't in the lane to block Bouchard's attempt. So that's what, 6 potential mini breakdowns leading to that goal. That's really unfortunate at that type of with that little time left.
No, of course. And I think that, I mean, look, Rick Tocchet said that JT Miller texted him this morning and said sorry for his game. He felt like he didn't play well, and he didn't yesterday. And it obviously compounded, blowing the zone, not being able to be in the shooting lane. And there's a reason why the Canucks, are where they are. The series is tied 2-2 as we move forward now, Harm. You're there in Edmonton. You saw exactly what you saw. We're going to be looking towards game 5 now. So all the talk today has been about Elias Pettersson. The Canucks made him available. The only player that was available today. Rick Tocchet, saying what he had to say about, players showing up and passengers and all of that last night. But I think a lot of the talk today is going to be about number 40. Now, is he hurt? Is he not hurt? What's going on? I mean, I think, Farhan asked him if he was going through something. He didn't really answer the question, but to me, body language and just going and looking at it and listening, I know he's probably tired. Everyone's going through something, but just listening and watching that presser, I mean, there's a lot more to dig in than just, his play on the ice there for Elias Pettersson, isn't there?
Yeah, it's difficult. Obviously, behind the scenes, I've sort of heard rumblings that he's probably playing through something, but all we can evaluate is what we're seeing on the ice. And there's 2 sides to the coin, right? And I think both sides are true in that, number one, he flat out has terrible line mates, right? Like there's nothing you can really do to overlook or gloss over that point. Ilya Mikheyev has gone 60 games with 1 goal. Like, how is that possible? Like, you could strap me or you to Pettersson for 60 games. And I think just by accident, we could probably score 1 or 2 goals as well. Like I'm getting a natty hattie. Okay. That's what's happening for sure. Like, it's actually hard to believe, like 60 games, most of them next to Pettersson. And like you all you've got is 1 goal to show for it. Yeah. It's, pointless through the playoffs for Mikheyev. He, and it's not just that he's missing all these chances. Like, what else is he doing? Like, what is his role on that line? His role on that line feels like it's just to not F up defensively. Yep. Because it's not like he transports the puck up the ice. It's not like he gets in on the forecheck and is able to force turnovers to give the Canucks more offensive zone shifts. He's not a physical presence. He's definitely not a playmaking presence to set Pettersson up in scoring locations. He's an anchor. He's dead weight right now. Höglander, terrific regular season, struggled enormously in the playoffs so far. I imagine he gets back into the lineup in game 5. You have to, given that you need more offense, but he was having a tough time. And then what? The next plan B is to have Sam Lafferty, a struggling 4th liner, on that wing. Like, that is absolutely plaguing him. Now, I also believe that individually there's responsibility on him to drive play, to create chances. He doesn't have a 5-on-5 point in the series. It's on an individual level, it's not good enough. And it's not just that we're not seeing him drive enough. It's that I feel like there's too many instances where he just falls over too easily. And I've never really been one in previous stretches where he struggled to bring that up as, oh, why is he not strong enough on his feet? But it's kind of alarming right now, where the moment there's hard contact on him, he's either losing that battle or he's falling over. And I think he needs to be stronger on the puck.
Well, that's the reason why a lot of people out there are saying injury. Look, I've heard the same rumblings as you have. I really find it very hard to believe that Elias Pettersson is not playing through something, even though the team won't admit it. You look at the playoffs, a lot of guys are on that team right now, currently playing through something. So, I mean, as there's the Edmonton Oilers and tons of other teams. But this portion of the show, as we continue this, is brought to you by Wendy's. Frozen pucks are awesome when they're in the back of the other guy's net, but that doesn't mean you'd want to eat one. That's why Wendy's only ever uses fresh Canadian beef that's never seen the inside of a freezer in all their burgers. Whether you order a Baconator, Dave Single, or even a JBC, you'll only ever find real fresh beef that's juicy and loaded with fresh toppings. So download the Wendy's app, check out the latest deals, and order a burger that's only job is being delicious. The Canucks are going to need some beef in their lineup when they go tomorrow night against the Edmonton Oilers. Harm. Look, I still want to continue this Elias Pettersson conversation because you brought up an interesting point. Yes, it can be two things. He's got to drive his own line, but his line mates aren't good. They're terrible. They have been. So inserting a guy like Jonathan Lekkerimäki, which has kind of been going around some circles right now, isn't going to save Elias Pettersson. You know, bringing Vasily Podkolzin into the lineup, who, yeah, he's played pretty well. Not a lot of offense this season, is not going to save Elias Pettersson. The only person that's going to get Elias Pettersson out of whatever the hell he's going through is Elias Pettersson. And I think that that's kind of the message that Rick Tocchet is trying to get through, that is you got to play through this. You know, the playoffs are a different animal. There's something there. There's something that you need to grasp within yourself. And you mentioned it off the top, will. You got to will yourself to these things. So for us looking at it, I mean, we can break down this game in so many different angles and ways, but you're not moving Elias Pettersson to the wing. That's not happening. You're not touching the Elias Lindholm, Garland, Joshua line, and you're not touching that JT Miller line. So my question to you, you put your coach's hat on, what do you do, Harm?
Yeah, and this is where it's so difficult, where I've seen a ton of people ripping Rick Tocchet to say, well, give him line mates. Like, why are you criticizing the guy? And I'm thinking, well, how many proposals have I seen from fans of a potential lineup that makes sense where Pettersson has better line mates? I think it's as simple as organizationally, they don't have enough impact wingers right now. Like, I don't know that there's a lot that Tocchet can do in terms of juggling the lines to sort of resolve this, because I've heard some people throwing out, bring the Lotto line back, but that doesn't actually accomplish anything. Like, the Miller line has already been sort of going offensively in this playoffs. The whole point of having Pettersson going is so that you're not a one-line offensive team. Now, if you put the Lotto line together, you're still a 1.5 line offensive team. The half, of course, maybe being the Lindholm line, considering they've had stretches where they've been effective, especially against a team like Edmonton. Like, you're not going to win that top-heavy matchup. Like, the way you're going to beat the Oilers is by having a deeper lineup and having your second, third, fourth lines outperform Edmonton's second, third, fourth lines. And so, like, that's the biggest thing that I come back to. Now, again, the other potential suggestion, playing Joshua and Garland with Pettersson, a couple problems with that. Number one, feels like that Joshua, Garland, and Lindholm have excelled as a line. So do you want to break that up? Number one. And number two, Tocchet clearly trusts Lindholm to match up against anyone, whether it's McDavid, whether it's Draisaitl. And so if you're going to throw Lindholm in that situation, like, he needs all the help he can get from a defensive standpoint and from a play driving standpoint, because he's playing the toughest matchups. Pettersson right now is mostly going up against the Ryan McLeod line. So I'm sure from Tocchet's perspective, he's thinking, yeah, maybe I could give you Joshua or Garland, but Lindholm needs the help more than you do, because he's playing substantially tougher minutes, and is not just trying to create offense, but is trying to shut guys down defensively. So, I mean, I don't know. The only suggestion that maybe you could consider, and I'm not sure that I'm even a big fan of it, is I've heard some people say, well, what about you reunite the OG third line of Joshua, Garland, Bluger, and play Lindholm and Pettersson together? But the flaw that I see
playing on the wing. He won't. It's just not happening. And Lindholm, you need as a natural center. Like, I think that
Yeah.
that's one of the things that I understand from this fan base, and you want to get Elias Pettersson going. Trust me, we don't want to sit here and listen to people and us have to talk about what's wrong with Elias Pettersson every single game. We just don't. So it's Rick Tocchet's job and it's Elias Pettersson's job to figure it out. But he's not going to play on the wing. Having Elias Lindholm, who's been probably one of, if not your most consistent and best player in the playoffs, other than probably Brock Besser and Artur Silovs to date, moving from a position of power of where he's playing is just pointless. So I understand the angst among the fan base and giving him better line mates, but it's also figuring it out yourself. So I agree with you. It's just there's so much that needs to happen and go well. But when one guy's playing so well and he can't even go up against a Ryan McLeod line and play well, then there's a lot more definitely going on there. Harm, isn't there?
Well, that's the whole point now, right? Is it's not that, and this is, again, if you want to take a glass half full approach, the Canucks don't need Pettersson to take games over. No. Like, they've gotten to this point and he hasn't taken a single game over in these playoffs. They don't need him to dominate. All they need him to do is in third line matchups against a McLeod line that has mostly been invisible, right? You're talking about McLeod, in Perry on that line. I think Holloway was on that line for a bit, but he obviously got promoted into the top 6 last game. It's not like you're going up against Draisaitl as a second line opponent. You've got an opportunity to go up against, their softer third line. Plus, how many shifts has he had against the Kulak-Desharnais pair? It's, again, like, we're not talking about an Edmonton team that has a deep blue line and he's having to go up against top defensemen. The Ekholm-Bouchard pair is basically a 5-man unit with, not last game because they finally split McDavid and Draisaitl up, but they're using that top pair with the top 6 exclusively. Edmonton is. Yeah. So you're not having to score on Ekholm-Bouchard. They're only legitimately high-end defense pair. And so that's, like, the bar isn't high in terms of what Pettersson needs to do to be effective and help the Canucks win hockey games.
No, absolutely. I mean, as we get set to talk about this game 5 coming up tomorrow night at Rogers Arena, it should be fun. And, this portion of the show, as we continue the conversation about the Canucks and Edmonton Oilers, is presented by the 4 Winds IPA. It's a bitter beer for the sweetest coast. This classic IPA was made for folks who want a hoppy beer, hitting major keynotes of citrus and flower while finishing a mellow, hoppy flourish. This is an IPA for IPA lovers. Available at liquor stores across the province or for home delivery through 4windsbrewing.ca. In addition, their tap room in Delta, BC. 4 Winds beers can be found in bars, restaurants, many liquor stores throughout BC and Alberta, as well as a few select export markets around the world. So be sure to check out 4 Winds Brewing today. You look at it, and another point of conversation I wanted to get into, kind of moving away from Elias Pettersson a little bit, Harm, is Thatcher Demco. Rick Tocchet went out today and said he's made significant progress, in the last 72 hours. From what I know, he still hasn't taken a shot from any of the Black Aces that are here, from the AHL guys that are skating. It's kind of just from Ian Clark. The post-to-post movement obviously is something that you're going to want to see from him, and maybe for him to get into a practice or at least have some sort of high-intensity workout. If he is doing that today, obviously we don't know. They only had the availability there, but game 6, I'm not entirely sure. I think that it's still a stretch that we see him in this series. What do you think?
Yeah, I also think that there's not as much of a pressure or
desperation,
sense of urgency, given how well Silovs has played. Again, in game 4, through the first 2 periods, Edmonton only scored 2 goals. They could have easily had 4, given the types of chances that they had. And again, just watching Silovs play, it's the rebound control. It's in the first period, for example, Evan Bouchard, there was a play where McDavid was looping around the net in the offensive zone. All eyes were on McDavid. And so when that happens, sometimes whether it's Ekholm or Bouchard, their defensemen find ways to get to the slot and sort of go undetected because everybody's back is face turned toward McDavid to see what he's going to do. And in that situation, it was not just Silovs' quick anticipation, but like seeing how aggressively he got to the top of his blue paint to cut the angle down and stop Bouchard, who arguably has one of the best shots in the league from defensemen, to make a high danger grade A chance save. Like, that's impressive. And I think that speaks to the level of confidence that he's playing with right now. Where Silovs, the only, of course, question mark you sometimes run into is how well does he track pucks through traffic on medium to long range shots? But overall, his body of work, I think, has been solid enough that it's just so. I'm a little bit uneasy with the idea of Demco, missing some time. Obviously, multiple injuries, not just the one, and now he hasn't even practiced really with the main group yet and gotten a ton of shooting volume from NHL shooters.
Yep.
And now you're going to ramp him up so quickly and airdrop him into like a game 6 or game 7, not just against an NHL team, not just against a top offensive team, but against McDavid, Draisaitl, and those types of players. You're going to expect him to go up against that vaunted power play. Like, that's a lot to ask for. There's risk in it. Like, what version of Demco are you getting? Because look, if you could guarantee that you're going to get the normal, healthy version of Demco, then of course we know on paper that he's an elite goaltender. You want that guy in the crease, but it is a legit question mark given how much time he's missed and how quickly he's having to ramp up again.
Well, that's the thing. And it's been an arty party. I mean, he's played well enough to get his team to this point. He looks calm, cool, and collected, but I agree with you. What you mentioned is being able to track pucks from long range. And, you make that a point because Kevin Woodley said it yesterday on Rinkwide, had him on postgame before Jeff Pettersson came on. And he said that was one of the things that Silovs did struggle with. It was being able to track those pucks from long range, from those long range shooting areas. So the Edmonton Oilers defense, they have a lot of goals in this series, right? They have more goals than the Vancouver Canucks defensemen do. They have more points. The Canucks defensemen have more points. But when you look at it, those long range goals, right? They're getting traffic in front of the net. They're causing some havoc there. But on the other side, you put Thatcher Demko in there and you just, like you said, airdrop them into this series. One bump, one slight movement. You're not getting into the feel of the game. You haven't played a hockey game in quite some time, and you're just going to get thrown in, like you mentioned, against the Edmonton Oilers. It's just going to be a troubling thing to do. I understand that it's a good story to have, that your goalie is, you've got the ace in your pocket and you could throw him out when you're ready. I just don't see it. And I don't think the Canucks, like you mentioned, Harm, are that desperate to go and make that move yet.
It's also like Demco internally has to sort of know, I'm 100% healthy.
Yep.
Not that I'm 80% healthy and can play through this. Not that I'm 90% healthy and can play through this, but 100%, because you also don't want a goaltender who's playing, but it's lingering in the back of your mind that you're coming back from an injury. And again, that just can't be in the back of your mind. It has to be the sort of thing where I'm 100% good to go. I don't feel any lingering effects, and it's not going to affect my mental game either. That's another key component if you're going to get to the point where you drop Demko in. But again, I thought Silovs for the most part was really good last night. And if he's playing at this level, I don't think there's a level of desperation to turn to Demko. Now, could this conversation change if Silovs has a bad start in game 5 or 6? Maybe, but up until now, up until right now, I'm not chomping at the bit to rush Demko back in time for game 6 or game 7.
Well, I don't think, I think game 7 is out of the question. I think that if Demko were to come back, it's because you're down 3-2 and that's your wild card, right? Mm-hmm. I just think that might be way too much to ask for from a guy coming into game 7. I understand it's on home ice. You control a lot of it, but that's a lot. That's a pressure packed situation to kind of go into, and it's wild. I mean, look, fans are going to be screaming. Fans are going to have, they're all sorts of their gear on tomorrow. It's going to be a wild night, and also in game 7 as well, as the playoffs are here. We have Army Nation gear, Harm. It's ready to gear you up for Vancouver's playoff run. Well, we're already on that run. Rep your favorite team as they battle for the cup. Shop the exclusive We Have an Army playoff tee and more at nationgear.ca. Some of the gear is pretty sweet. Saw Jeff Pettersson was wearing one, a couple games ago when we did Rinkwide when he was here in studio. He had a pretty sweet hoodie on. Lots of jerseys, lots of people in the building, watching in the away game, viewing, watch parties here at Rogers Arena. So it's definitely been a fun time to have playoff hockey back. Second round playoff hockey back here in Vancouver. Going into tomorrow night, adjustments. Rick Tocchet's going to have to make some. Chris Knobloch's going to have to make some, even though they did win the game. You want it with 30 seconds left. So McDavid and Draisaitl didn't play 30 minutes. I think it was 22 minutes for McDavid. It was 20 minutes for Draisaitl. Might have been reversed. I've double checked that. But how encouraging is that for the Oilers? And if you're the Vancouver Canucks, it's what do you need to do to try and contain those two lines?
Yeah, of course it helps that they're playing on separate lines. So now there isn't an urgency of, well, if they're playing on the same line together, there's such a drop off with the second line, third line, fourth line that you feel like you need at least one of them on the ice at all times. Well, if they're together on one line, that means you need to use that line a ton. Whereas, of course, if they're spread out, it means, well, you can play those guys, 22 minutes or so, maybe a little bit more than that if you have to in game 5. And yet you at least still have one of those guys on the ice for the majority of the game. But the second aspect for why they were able to limit his minutes is simply that they took the lead. The Oilers haven't spent a lot of time since game 1 carrying leads for sustained stretches of the game. And so that helps in terms of being able to manage that. Obviously, them having last change helped the cause as well. And from a Canucks perspective, I mean, I don't think they need to change a whole lot in relation to McDavid and Draisaitl because, look, McDavid, he took over game 2, but outside of that, how many has he, especially at 5-on-5, just single-handedly dominated? I think the Canucks have done a decent job in that respect, and it was actually pretty surprising to see that JT Miller, for example, head-to-head against McDavid at 5-on-5, about 37 minutes and 37 seconds. Canucks have gotten their teeth kicked in from a territorial standpoint, but they haven't surrendered a goal against. So they're not necessarily getting crushed there. I think it also helps when we talk about Canucks adjustments. The biggest one isn't even necessarily an adjustment. It's getting Carson Soucy back. I think that is going to be massive because Vancouver's defensemen outside of Hughes really struggled last night. I think that's a major part of why through the first 2 periods, especially, they were in their own end a lot. And you just look at the numbers. The scoring chances with Quinn Hughes on the ice at 5-on-5 last game, 11-3 in favor of the Canucks. The scoring chances without Quinn Hughes on the ice at 5-on-5, 18-5 for the Oilers.
And I thought Quinn Hughes has been quiet. He's not scoring goals or putting up points, but he's definitely giving his team a chance to win.
Yeah, and when you look at the other pairs, I thought Myers and Cole were basically unplayable. They couldn't break the puck out. Cole, of course, has struggled to clear the zone for basically this entire series. But then Myers, who has typically this season done a pretty good job of when I'm going back for pucks under pressure against the other team's forecheck, that I can make a sound decision. I thought he struggled in those situations to make the next play, to make the right decision. I thought he lost battles down low. And on top of that, a couple of situations here and there where he pinched and got caught, right? So inserting Soucy, I think is going to go a long way in terms of hopefully stabilizing that bottom 4 and ensuring that the Canucks can control play a little bit better.
I want to ask you, we're going to get to a break very quickly here, but I want to ask you about the Canucks defense as we continue this here on Canucks Conversation. We will be right back in just a second after a message from one of our sponsors.
To hear from helpstartshere.gov.bc.ca. We've all heard of the overdose crisis, also known as the toxic drug crisis, but did you know that it affects men disproportionately? Last year, 78% of people dying here in BC were men, and the majority were 30 to 59 years old. It's not easy to struggle with addiction, and the stigma around it can make it harder for people to reach out for help. But there is help and support available. Every journey is different, and the thing that helps might not be the same for everyone. So when someone does reach out, be compassionate and have open, non-judgmental conversations. We here at Canucks Conversation want to be part of the solution. If you or someone you care about is struggling, you can find support and services near you at helpstartshere.gov.bc.ca. You can also watch powerful real-life stories of recovery on the Help Starts Here website.
All right, Harm, back here on Canucks Conversation. I want to talk a bit about the Canucks defense. You mentioned Myers and Cole. I think Myers has given this team absolutely everything that he could give them and more, to be completely honest. Are you taking Ian Cole out of the lineup, or are you taking Noah Juulsen out of the lineup for Carson Soucy tomorrow night?
Yeah, that's a big debate. And look, if Juulsen had a good game, I think the answer would have been Cole.
Yep.
But Juleson has the pinch that leads to the Nugent Hopkins goal. I thought he had stretches in the first half of the game where you're like, okay, Juleson's making some defensive stops. He's in some passing lanes. He's keeping things calm, but also like little plays where he kills offense. In that second period, for example, there was one shift where the Kulak pair was trapped on the ice forever, right? And you're like, okay, Canucks are finally starting to get into the game. They're generating some momentum. I think it was on the back of a Quinn Hughes shift. And it's like, okay, can you start to mount? Can you start to build something, especially because you're trailing? And Juleson, he steps on the ice, and from the blue line, with no traffic in front, loads up for a slap shot right into Pickard for an easy save, and they're able to get the whistle, and Kulak's able to change. Like that's a moment like that, you can't waste that offensively.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I know Cole's been horrible, but I also feel like part of his struggles have been twofold. Number one, I think he's had breaks go against him. Like, yes, he's played poorly, but he's in the spotlight extra because he can't get a break. Number two, I also think the adjustment with Cole is you've got to play him less often against Edmonton's top six. You got to ease his minutes a little bit because Cole isn't playing the role of a typical third pair defenseman right now. He gets a ton of defensive zone starts. He gets a ton of shifts where he's facing the top of Edmonton's lineup in various situations. And when you sort of compare the numbers when he's out there against the McDavid or Draisaitl versus Edmonton's bottom six, it's night and day. So I would give Cole the edge there, as unpopular as that may sound, but I'm reducing his usage, making sure that he's actually getting bottom six competition more often. I'm easing off on the defensive zone starts. Again, in part because I also don't have a lot of trust in Jules.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. I think the biggest thing was situational awareness, right? You got to know when you're on the ice, who's on the ice, and that pinch, it might cost him. And it's unfortunate because you like the kid. He's had some success with the Canucks, but if you're Rick Tocchet, you're probably going with the defenseman that, has got the pedigree and you've trusted all season, and you think he can play himself out of this. Like that one mistake, or maybe a couple mistakes, as you just mentioned, could cost Noah Juleson. But it's an interesting one to definitely discuss as we go along this show. Time now for our Mr. Lube poll question, brought to you by Mr. Lube. Need a tire change or tire service? Mr. Lube provides no appointment tire service and sales. Drop by anytime for tire rotation, tire repair, and balancing. Servicing makes and models, all makes and models, including electric vehicles. 16 locations in the Lower Mainland. For one near you, go to mrlube.com. As we keep going and definitely look at this, here is our poll question. Today's Canucks Conversation poll question, brought to you, obviously, by Mr. Lube. What concerns you the most about the Game 4 loss in Edmonton? Ineffective power play, team defense, Elias Pettersson, or other? It's actually wild because Elias Pettersson is 40.3%, but the ineffective power play, 49.4%. Elias Pettersson, there's also 4 other players that are on that ineffective power play, Harm, right? So I get the people talking about Elias Pettersson, but there's also 4 other guys that are on that power play. I think it was definitely a lot more of a combination of things that worried me about Game 4.
Yeah, I don't think there was one major thing that stuck out. Of course, the power play, given how electric Edmonton's man advantage is, it's going to need to come through. And look, as the series goes deeper, you're hoping, if you're the Canucks, that there's less special teams on both sides of the equation. We've discussed this before, where the longer a series goes, on average, there are fewer penalties called on each side. Now, there haven't been a ton of penalties called through the early portion of the series. I think Edmonton had 4 power play opportunities through the first 2 games or something along those lines. It's not like they were fed 4, 5, 6 a game, but that's something that you're hoping comes through as we get to games 5, 6, and if we get to 7, is that maybe mitigates the special teams differential. But I think the reason you're also maybe focusing on the power play a little bit more is you actually maybe have some hope that it can get going. Like we've seen it actually produce in this series, Whereas with Pettersson, like how high, honestly, is the confidence level that he's going to bust out of this? Considering that there's no help coming in terms of wingers,
Yeah.
like how confident are you that that factor is going to change?
I'm not, to be completely honest. I'm not at all. I think I agree with you. And every time that he touches the puck or someone leans on him or it's a heavy puck battle along the boards, he's on the ice more often than not. Now, look, he could come out tomorrow night and score 2 goals and have an assist, and the power play could absolutely cook, and we could say Elias Pettersson is back. Yes, back for 1 game. You need to see it on a consistent basis, and we just haven't seen it, Harm. We haven't seen it since basically the All-Star break. January 24th, Rick Tocchet went out and had a media availability and said, I need more from Elias Pettersson. We're now on to May 15th and in round 2 of the Stanley Cup final, and now he's saying, yeah, I don't know what I need, or I don't have nothing else to say. He's got to be better. Basically, I'm paraphrasing, but there's so much there. So the confidence level, I agree with you. I mean, we watched this team, cover this team for a long time. The confidence level of him breaking out of it is less than, I don't really have a high one, to be completely honest.
Yeah, and as we sort of discuss game 5 and sort of what maybe needs to change overall, this obviously includes Pettersson, but it's about a lot more than just him. They need to find a way to generate more offense. They need to find a way to get more looks, because Pickard was solid when he needed to be, but the Canucks didn't test him nearly enough. And here's a guy
hard enough. No, you're right.
Yeah, and here's a guy that hadn't started in the playoffs before, not just the NHL playoffs, but his career in junior in the AHL as well. Doesn't really have a lot of playoff experience. He was solid enough in the regular season, I guess, but the Canucks, if they can find a way to test him more regularly, like who knows, he could break down, and like that could be a pathway for you to win games. And look, for as much as Edmonton's defensive metrics have improved under their time with Chris Knobloch, that's still a group that is prone to defensive lapses, and we saw that at times in game three, I believe, especially in that first period where you had guys doubling up on JT Miller in the corner, Brock Besser's left open in the slot, the turnovers like the Warren Fogle one, like they're prone to lapses. So if you can just find a way to apply more pressure, get the forecheck established, I think that's one of the main reasons why they weren't able to generate a lot of offensive looks is, hey, you're not looking at this team to create a lot off the rush. They need to do it off the cycle. They need to be retrieving pucks, creating some havoc, of course, with their patented, like going from low to high and shooting for tips and deflections. And if you can put pressure on guys like Darnell Nurse and Cody Ceci, and of course, Edmonton split up their D pairs, but those guys are vulnerable. Again, even though Edmonton won game 4, and even though they were in control for most of that game territorially, there were still moments where I was watching Cody Ceci try and break a puck out, and I'm like, oh my God, can this guy actually do this? Right? There are still moments where I'm like, geez, when is Darnell Nurse going to win a puck battle down low? But you've got to create your own luck. You've got to force those guys into those uncomfortable positions so that you can actually capitalize on some of those weaknesses, because they're there. Trust me, this Edmonton lineup is flawed. And when we look at the series to this point, tied 2-2, the Canucks have the extra game on home ice. This is a closer series than I thought it would be heading into, like, before it started. So in game 5, they've got to find a way to apply more offensive pressure. And that has to be as a team, not just on the Pettersson line.
No, 100%. And I think that's why we have these games and then we talk about them every single day. That's one of the beauties of the NHL postseason, Harm. We get to cover it because it's all about adjustments. It's what team's going to do what to try and, counter the other team's differences and mistakes and things like that. But hey, hockey heads, get ready for the daily face-off playoff parlay challenge. Each game day, answer 4 questions, pick the winning team, guess if points will be over, under, predict the first goal, choose the highest scoring period. Daily winners snag gift cards while each round's champs pocket some cash. Yeah, it'd be nice to pocket cash. Play now at games.dailyfaceoff.com and prove your puck prowess. It's fast, it's fun, it's all about hockey. Let's go. I had to do this. Grady got me to do this. And, there was so many things to talk about in the Colorado Avalanche Dallas Stars game. So I picked the Avalanche to win over 6.5 goals, including overtime. First goal, Colorado Avalanche. Highest scoring period will be the second period. Miro Heiskanen probably going to get a point. McKinnon under 1.5 assists. I think if anyone's going to get the assist, it's going to be Cale Makar. McKinnon's going to go beast mode. But if you look at that series, Harm, as a whole, like the Dallas Stars have done a pretty good job of limiting Cale Makar and Nathan McKinnon, haven't they?
Yeah, and I just think they're like the Nichushkin blow is devastating for them.
Yeah.
Like not just what he brings as a player, and of course what he has 9 postseason goals, but
Yeah.
for that group as a whole, like they know that they don't have the elite offensive depth to be able to make a deep run without them. Colorado is a top heavy team as well. Like they're not much better than Edmonton in that respect, especially because they lost such a crucial underrated cog in their middle six and Logan O'Connor, who is quietly such a key sort of two-way driver for them. And so I think that's a series-changing loss for Colorado. I don't think that they're going to be able to come back and win this series.
No, I absolutely agree with you. I think it's going to be tough, a very tough uphill battle to climb for the Colorado Avalanche. But you know what? For today's purposes and the purposes of this show, we're going to bet that they win. And also, as we continue this, our Bet365 bet of the day, brought to you by Bet365, proud partner of Canucks Conversation. So you open an account with Bet365 today, bet on a huge range of markets, whatever the sport, whatever the moment. It's never ordinary at Bet365. Be sure to use Van Bonus when you sign up for an account. Harm, I don't know if you saw this, Kate, not my bet, but a fan out there put this bet together. $1. It was plus 95,000 and it hit. $951. This person was able to cash in. So you look at some of the parlays. Evan Bouchard over half an assist. That's automatic on the power play. Matthias Ekholm, half an assist there. The one that is interesting, Edmonton Oilers to score last. That one cashed in under 30 seconds in the game. So obviously, you look at some of these bet slips and what people are coming up with on Bet365. There's a lot to do on the same game parlay, but $1 into 951. Oh man, that's got to be a good feeling.
That's wild. That's like one of those like rare parlays that my friends always shoot for that they never hit.
It's the ones that I shoot for and never hit too. I mean, it was a little bit smaller amount. It's a little bit smaller, the amount's higher, but it's, I mean, good for that person. It's wild to see that. And yeah, that's a great payday to sit there. I mean, I wonder if they were a Canucks fan or a Oilers fan or just watching the game. But anyways, time for one of our favorite segments here on this show, and I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, it's time for anyone else, presented by the Vancouver Canadians. Great spring weather is here, and it's time to get out to the net to catch your Vancouver Canadians in action. The Seas are on the road right now, but have a 6-game homestand starting on Tuesday, May 28th, which includes a superstar appearance by Buck Martinez on the 28th, a nooner at the net on Friday, May 31st, and a family fun Sunday on June 2nd. Catch fireworks, giveaways, Friday nooners, and superstar appearances all spring and summer long. To get your tickets, call 604-872-5232 or go to CanadiansBaseball.com. Lots
of people in our YouTube chat. Also, people still voting here on our Mr. Lou poll question. 52% still now say it's the ineffective power play that has people most concerned about this Vancouver Canucks team. But it's funny because you look at it and, people are saying a lot of things. Well, Nurse is better than Zadorov or Myers by far. I'm not entirely sure about that one. I think Nikita Zadorov right now is definitely proving his worth. There's another one, Harm, that I wanted to look at and show you. Where was it? A lot of people are talking in our YouTube chat here about Darnell Nurse and his salary. Yes, that's been a question. It has definitely been a question about it. And it will continue to be because that $9 million, that's a lot of salary for Darnell Nurse. Someone says Phil Kessel would have been great here on the Canucks. What say you to that, Harm?
No. Yep. I don't think he has the two-way chops to have kept up. I don't think you would have been able to trust him defensively. Even in Vegas last season, he was an empty calorie scorer, right? Like he'd get points here or there, but when you would look at the on-ice results, the Golden Knights would give back so much defensively that it was a moot point, and he wasn't able to give Vegas the type of power play spark it needed. There's a reason he didn't suit up for them much in the playoffs.
No, absolutely. Nar on YouTube. Is there a lower limit on how bad PD can perform in these playoffs? before Rutherford seriously considers moving him before his no movement clause kicks in. And it's funny, there are so many people that bring that up. I don't see it happening. I don't see we live in a world where you're going to give someone $90 million. I understand they signed the contract and, you can move it. He doesn't have a no movement clause, and it's interesting now. But if PD was lighting up the playoffs, absolutely nobody would be talking about that right now.
Yeah, I mean, there's no point even discussing it, right? Because, yeah, like he's really struggled since the All-Star break onward, but he's also been completely hampered by line mates. We have question marks about his health, which we'll have to wait till the end of the season to find out if reports come out about that. Even if he was 100% healthy, you're not dumping a guy just because he had one stretch where he really struggled. Like, yeah, it sucks, especially given the time of year. Like, it really does suck, but he's also 25 years old, right? Think about JT Miller, for example. What was JT Miller at 25 years old? JT Miller at 25 years old couldn't produce in the playoffs either.
Yeah, but Elias Pettersson at 25 years old has had a lot of regular season success. JT Miller didn't before he turned 25.
True, but even relative to his regular season production, Miller, like you look back, it wasn't until Miller's bubble run that he actually became a productive offensive player in the playoffs.
Yep.
And before that, like, yeah, was he like a point per game player in his previous stops in Tampa or the Rangers? No, but he had seasons where he put up 50 plus points, 56 points, and he would kind of go quiet in the playoffs. Like, big picture, I'm not worried about that contract yet.
Unplugged can we get Lekkerimäki to play with Pettersson? Look, I'm going to say this right away. Like, Jonathan Lekkerimäki is not going to save Elias Pettersson. It's a great story if he comes in and plays well. And I understand they're both Swedish. He's a young kid. He's 19 years old. But again, 19-year-old kid playing in his first NHL playoff game at home. Yeah, you can protect him a little bit, but you need to see more from the guys that you currently have, like a 24-year-old or 24 goal scorer this year, Niels Höglander, and some other guys in this lineup as well.
Yeah, you don't want to put him straight into the fire. Like, he's never played in the NHL before. He's only played 6 AHL games, out of which he had 2 assists. He didn't even score. Right. So it's not like if he was lighting up the AHL in the 6 games that he played, you could say, oh, wow, look at how quickly he's transitioning to pro hockey in North America, which, by the way, is quite different from pro hockey in Europe, where smaller ice surface. It's a lot more physical of a game, plus also his stature. Right. This is a guy that needs to put a lot of weight on, and you're going to throw him into big boy hockey in the playoffs. Like, you got to put a guy in a position to succeed. Plus, can you trust him defensively? Can you trust him in the defensive zone, wall work wise, to get pucks out? Yeah, because Edmonton's been forechecking well for as well as they create off the rush. In Game 4, they were ferocious, and Vancouver's wingers were under a lot of duress to make defensive stops. You're not throwing him into the fire, in especially like the longer the series goes on. If it's a Game 6 or a Game 7, you're going to throw him not just into a playoff environment, but round 2, a potential elimination game. Like, no, you can't do that to him.
No. Grady, let's get you involved. What do you think?
Sorry, what was the question?
Thank you for listening to the show.
I was editing something.
Jonathan Lekkerimäki, you put him in or not?
I think it's a pretty tall order for a guy that didn't really light it up in the AHL and the sample that he had. It's a physical series. You got some big forwards on the Oilers' end. So there's a part of me that says protect the guy, don't throw him into the Sharks there. Now I'm starting to have a change of thought because Mikheyev's given you nothing. And they've tried Linus Karlsson. Niels Amon has come in. So they clearly are open to trying different things. He can't be worse than Ilya Mikheyev, right? And
I mean, he can.
You can.
Well, yeah, I guess
it's
he
hard
could.
to fathom.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a tough call. They got to change up something. I would look at Höglander, Podkolzin first because you kind of know what you have there. Höglander's shown he could score. At least with Podkolzin, he'll get in on the forecheck. They haven't won a lot of board battles. Pods can win board battles. He can create chances, but again, it's the finish, right? So, Lekkerimäki, he'll get some shots on goal, I imagine, but I don't know. It just doesn't seem like the right time to be experimenting with that. It screams desperation to me.
Yeah.
But then again, you're looking for anything at this point.
100%. I agree. The series is still tied 2-2, and you have home ice advantage. But I agree with you, right? Like it's the desperation factor. But even Rick Tocchet admitted today, he said anything's basically on the table. I'm swinging a bat. Someone in our YouTube chat, Bubble PD was hot. So question mark. I agree. We need to stop talking about the bubble. Like stop it. Like we have to. They've already won a round in these playoffs, and PD was a non-factor there. So he's really going to be, and he's another guy here that's just kind of going along. Yeah, I understand he has the goal. You're not going to go back to someone you were a few years ago. It's just not going to happen. He's not going to go home and watch film of how good he played against the Vegas Golden Knights or whatever team it was in the bubble and be like, oh man, maybe I can be that guy tomorrow. It's just not going to happen. I'm sorry. We can keep looking as we go down here. Matt and Vanessa, do you leave Amon and Carlson in, Harm?
Honestly, at this point, it's like you've got so many of these like passengers, as Tocchet calls it. Like I honestly don't care who, like Hoglander comes in.
I agree.
And honestly, pick a name out of a hat, like whether it's Amon, whether it's Carlson, whether it's Lafferty, whether it's Mikheyev. Like I don't like any of them. And look, to his credit, at least Carlson played well in his first playoff game, but he was a non-factor last night and wasn't nearly as impactful. Like I don't even want to analyze this because it's like as Bot, we remember when Botch would talk about like the Sea of Granlands. Like this is that.
Yep, 100%. I agree with you. And well, I think the one thing we do know is PDG probably gets back into the lineup.
Sure, he's also part of that group.
Yeah, but he's part of their PK, so he's at least serviceable there. But I agree with you. He's part of the group of people that aren't really good. But then that's the thing. It's you're getting so much from some of these guys that have given you so much already that are capped out at what more they can do. Connor Garland can't do any more for this team than he's already been doing. Tyler Myers is not doing any more for this team than he's already been doing. Elias Lindholm, same kind of thing there, right? These guys are peaking and playing so well. Brock Besser is giving you everything every single night. So the passenger comment is definitely that because there are just so many of them and it's so noticeable, Harm, every single game.
Yeah, I do think there's room for improvement with the blue line, though. Again, with Susie coming back, at least I'm not necessarily talking from a whole playoffs perspective, that whole sample size, because again, that's where I'd look at Myers, for example, and say he's had a pretty good playoffs. However, if you're looking at just game 4, because before game 4, the Canucks were leading the series. In game 4, you didn't have Carson Soucy. I thought Myers struggled. Arguably, you could maybe make the case that it was his worst game of the playoffs. Ian Cole hasn't been anywhere near his peak. Like he's got a lot of room to improve. So those three, like that's half your blue line that has the potential to play better. And if those guys play better, it's not just that those guys individually are performing better. So now all of a sudden you're going to be better defensively. That matters in terms of, okay, now you're breaking the puck out better. That means your forwards have more possession of the puck. It lifts your entire forward group up a little bit. It gives your top 6 lines an opportunity to spend more time in the offensive zone to cook, to maybe then exploit the Oilers' weaknesses of Pickard or their blue line after that top pair of Echo and Bouchard. So I get where you're coming from in that I look at the forward group and I'm like, yes, there are a lot of passengers, and yet at the same time, they're outside of Pettersson. There aren't a lot of guys that I look at and say, well, or like Hoglander's, for example, is actually a good example of he's going to come into the lineup. If you can get the regular season version of him, you can actually extract more out of him, right? Yeah. Hopefully. So I do think as I'm thinking this through that, yeah, I don't fully agree with the idea that this team is maxed out to its potential and that there aren't guys that can play better. Even JT Miller compared to game 4 can play a lot better.
No, I don't think I didn't say the team is. I think there are certain players that have given you everything that you needed and they've maxed out to what they can do. I just think that obviously as a team as a whole, yeah, definitely on so many different levels, they can definitely max out to their potential as well. But Harm, we've maxed out to our potential here, to be completely honest. I want to thank you for doing this all the way back from beautiful Edmonton. Are you a pretzel guy or a peanuts guy or a cookies guy on the plane?
None. None. I don't like pretzels.
Protein there, Irf. This guy's
exactly.
What, you're on the getting jacked diet or what? Me too, kind of.
I'm trying. I'm
shake.
trying.
There you go.
Mid-flight protein shake for Harmer, protein bar.
That's good.
Well,
Just
it's funny you say that. I had a Booster Juice protein shake, but I finished it before I boarded.
Yeah. You remind me of me. You're young, skinny. I'm old and still the same. So there is hope, hopefully, for you, Harm.
Hopefully.
Well, thank you for doing this. I really look forward to game 5 tomorrow night. It's going to be the Canucks. It's going to be the Edmonton Oilers. And there's going to be some decisions that need to be made for lineups. We hope, I think a lot of people in this city and that watch this show and continue to interact with us on the daily are hoping to see Elias Pettersson show up. I think some of his teammates would as well. The Edmonton Oilers are looking to come steal one here in Vancouver and hopefully end this series at home on Saturday. But for Harman Dial, I'm Irfaan Gaffar, Grady Sass in the back hitting buttons. This is Canucks Conversation.
Canucks Conversation with Harman and Quads brought to you by the Toyota BZ4X. The BZ4X's fresh look is just an added bonus to its range since you can drive up to 406 kilometers on a single charge. That's enough to get you from Kitsilano to Whistler or Kamloops to Kelowna and back and still be home in time for the game. Now that's what we'd call electric. The best part, by choosing electric, you can get up to $11,000 in rebates and incentives. The BZ4X are in stock and selling quickly, so make sure to visit shoptoyota.ca or your local Pacific Toyota dealer to get your hands on one. Canucks Conversation is live Monday through Friday, every weekday at 2 p.m. over on the Canucks Army YouTube channel. Make sure you like, subscribe, and interact in the YouTube live chat every day with us, folks.